It's 9:10 roughly.
Is Ben with us? I know Ben was going to join us.
Hi, guys. We are live.
We will wait for Mr. Ben.
I am here.
Hey, Ben, good morning to you.
Hey, Russ, Derek, Jackie, and the rest.
Good morning, Mr. Richardson.
Okay, then we are all here, and I'd like to call the meeting to order, please.
All right.
Mr. Wynn will give us the traditional invocation, please.
Yes. Let us pray. Father, we thank you, Lord, for a beautiful day that you've given us here in Southwest Florida. And Lord, as we approach our zoning meeting today, we ask God that you would guide us, direct us. And there's many, this is their first time here. And I pray, Lord, that you would help us with the audio and the video and just allow everything to go smooth. And our agenda that's before us today, continue to give us the wisdom, the insight, be able to make wise decisions for the will of the people. And we pray your blessings on our time together. In your name, amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Russ.
Russ, that may have been the most practical invocation I've ever heard.
Well, I feel very practical today.
I would like to, if it's okay, lead the board in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May I ask that the roll call be made, please?
Chairman Rassio,
I am here.
Richard Donnelly,
Here.
Russ Wynn,
Here.
Bruce Galloway,
Here.
Gary Gambrill,
Here.
Ben Hershenson,
I am here.
Kelly
Body, soul,
Macklin.
and mind.
I am here.
Are we all present and accounted for?
Here, so.
Okay. As has been the tradition of the board, I would recommend that any public comment be made after the presentation of the applicant and staff. As we only have one, it shouldn't be too much of a delay for anyone who wishes to make a public comment. Will Attorney Rooney please swear in any witnesses? Who will be-
Absolutely. Anyone who intends to testify today, will you please swear or affirm that you intend to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yeah.
I do. Thank you.
Okay, well, this case is the Channel 30 Commercial Plan Development Amendment.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
Mr. Chairman, did you neglect the approval of the minutes?
oh, I'm sorry, yeah. Please forgive me. There are only three of us who are now and who were present at the prior meeting. I have read the minutes, and I have no issue with them, and I would move that they be approved.
I would second.
In favor?
Aye.
Okay, all approved.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. All right, now we can begin public hearings. Will you call the first witness, please, Attorney Rooney?
Jackie, do you have a brief intro, or do you want to let the applicant go first?
I can do a brief intro. Does everyone hear me?
Yes?
Okay, great. Jacqueline Genson with the Community Development Department. I am the lead planner assigned to this case. This is an amendment to an existing commercial plan development. The applicant filed the petition in 2018. It is an active site. They have submitted for several local development orders to replace a large tower. Their prior approvals from 2009 did include self-storage uses. This amendment request is to modify the height And as a result of that height modification, there is some changes to the south setback, but also it gave us the opportunity to reevaluate consistency with the current codes. The applicant was found sufficient back earlier this year, and they were scheduled for zoning board in March, but due to COVID-19, they were rescheduled during June timeframe, but then they wanted to wait until we had in-person meetings. But here we are in October. They would like to go ahead and be heard before the board. So we are here today, and with that, I will let Mr. Rogers, the applicant's agent, go ahead and introduce their case.
Thank you, Jackie, and thank you to the board for hearing us this morning. And first off, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Before I go to my presentation, I would like to introduce Tim Sheehan, who is the president of Super Towers, Inc., who's the applicant. And I think Tim wanted to just kind of give you a little brief history of the site. And then once he's finished with that, we'll move into our presentation. Tim?
Yes, thank you, and appreciate the time to have the hearing today. There is one other individual, Mike Sawyer, who's trying to link in still. He's a little technically challenged, but he's has a long history with the site. But according to oral tradition anyways, I think the site was first developed in 1972. My father-in-law, Ray Karpwitz, World War II veteran who's still with us, worked at the site from the early 80s until 1993 or so, when I purchased the towers from a media group out of New Jersey. I've owned the property since about 1997 when I bought the land from Barron Collier Company. And when we were first involved there, we were kind of a lone commercial property up that way. It's a lot different than it is today. There was where Mediterra was David Piper's swamp buggy rides. I used to take my swamp buggy rides on the Mediterra property. Should have bought it all instead of looking at the turtles. But anyways, back in 2004, I believe, we went before Bonita Springs City Council and had this project in its entirety approved. And due to things like replacing towers and economic changes, it's been delayed. But here we are finally, having spent a lot of time with Jackie, and I thanked her before the meeting for her professionalism and the staff of hers who have helped us tremendously to try to get this in the right spot. But primarily, some of the feedback that we had heard when the project was originally approved was that the five-story building that had been approved was a little bit too visual. And so the primary focus of this was to reduce one story from the five-story building and make both buildings 4 stories. It was originally approved as a 5-story building, a 3-story building. And so along the way, the land development code has changed and all kinds of different things have changed. And we tried to comply with everything as best we could with the help of Jackie and her team. And hopefully we are at a point that it's in approvable condition and we can move forward with the development. I will say, being a property owner of a number of properties in the area and in the commercial real estate space for a long time, Bonita, as you know, with the growth and a lot of the residential is in dire need of commercial space. I think there's a 95 or 97% commercial occupancy, which basically, keeps prices very high for small businesses and the like. And so hopefully with the addition of this capacity, both in storage and some small business, their type of inventory, it'll actually help out. The site itself is a long history, going back to 1972. Like I said, that's a commercial site. It's screened by vacant land in the front, the railroad bed, Southwest, Florida railroad bed, and then our property with a lake, a man-made lake on the property. And to the south is self-storage. To the east is a large wildland space donated by Mediterra. To the north, we actually donated 6/10 of an acre of our property to Wildland Preserve to the north. And then obviously across Highway 41, you have the Spanish Wells development, which is about 400 or so feet away from the proposed property. So with that, I will turn it back to Stuart and let him kind of walk through the presentation.
Thanks, Tim. So I would like to share my screen. Hopefully that's successful.
There you go, Stuart.
Yeah, okay. Got
Very
it.
good.
All right, success. Okay, so so this is a visual of the proposed two buildings. As you can see, the site has the two towers on it. The proposal has two buildings. The building to the south would be phase one. The building to the north would be phase two. As we said before, Tim is on the phone. I think at some point Mike will join us if he's not here already. So we'll be the three folks that will be on the call today. Okay, just to sum up the the request, we had a 5-story building approved and a 3-story building approved at 40 and 60 feet. This proposal makes both buildings 4 stories. And since the one building was larger than the other, by swapping 1 story on one building for 1 story on the other, we actually are now less intense than what was originally approved, which was 172,724 square feet. Now we're at 169,584. This also allows us the smaller building to the south is phase one. We're adding a story to that. So we're actually slightly increasing the square footage in phase one, but decreasing the square footage in phase two for an overall decrease. As part of that, there's some small communications buildings on the site, and we're asking for a slight increase. Those buildings are associated with the towers, but the net still is a pretty significant reduction. So just to very quickly just sort of give you a few visuals on the site. As Tim described, the site is a very odd shape with a 130-foot railroad right away to the west. Then there's some vacant land, and then there's the old 41 right away. And then the Cordova at Spanish Wells development is here, which has a significant buffer between their homes and old 41. So the long and the short is, once we build the second building, which is closest to the west, that'll be roughly 500 feet from the nearest resident. Also, on the east side, again, there's preserve area immediately adjacent to the site, then a golf course, and then these homes in Mediterra, and roughly they'll be the closest one about 700 plus feet from the building. So we're fairly well buffered and kind of sort of a weird little island sandwiched between the railroad and some self-storage and some preserve area. The applicant is preserving this north piece right here, which provides quite a bit of buffer, especially from any view from Old 41 coming from the south. This is a blow up of the site plan, just kind of a rendering of the site plan, so you can kind of see just on a little bit closer view. Again, the railroad right of way is here. It's 130 feet wide. This is the old 41 here. As you can see, the buffer, which lies to the west of that. And you can also see the preserve to the east. To the south, this is the county line, and this is a self-storage facility, which has been there many, many years. And as you can see, is quite intense. The site is accessed by Channel 30 Drive, which will need some improvements in order to facilitate this development. So that's also proposed as part of this project. Just a quick view of what this sort of looks like from the outside looking in. The picture to the left is if you're standing behind the residential units, at Mediterra, next to the golf course, this is what you would see. We tried to strike a line based on kind of calculating up the tower where that 50 foot of the top of our buildings would be. And that's about here. So as you can see, looks like from that vantage point, you'll see just barely the tops of the buildings. To the right, this is from the Cordova at Spanish Wells. This is from the intersection, the first intersection in the development. And you're looking across their preserve area, and you can't even really see old 41 in this picture. And then, there's the towers in the background. Again, looking at the building heights, it would be somewhere, right in here. So well buffered from both vantage points. We put this in here just to kind of give you an idea. These slides ignore the fact that there's a lot between 41 and the railroad that has trees. There's also trees in the railroad right away. These renderings sort of ignore that and just show what you would see if none of that existed. We try to give you a feel for what the site would look like, after 5 years of our plantings growth. This is our proposed buffer wall. These are our proposed plantings. This is what it would look like 10 years after planting. So we give you some idea that in addition to the natural buffers we've shown, this is the buffer that we're providing, as part of our development plan. The application includes a number of deviations. Some of these were previously approved and some of them were generated because the land development code changed since we last made the application in 2009, and some of these things then were generated other slight inconsistencies. Most of these deviations are slight setbacks or slight buffer type deviations. The first three were previously approved, and they're very minor adjustments to the buffers and a reduction for the parking requirements for self-storage. As you would imagine, self-storage really doesn't require very much parking. All of these deviations were supported by staff. The number 5 would be one that we're asking for a spatial deviation from 25 feet to 15 feet for that wall buffer that you saw in the previous slide. And there's already 130-foot spatial separation, virtue of the railroad, plus, the road right of way as well. So we're not asking for, any change in the 8-foot wall requirement or the landscaping. It's just that 10 feet variance in that spatial setback. These other setbacks are for the MCBs, either due to the change in the code or the fact that the MCB was already there. And we're just recognizing it now and asking for the variations. These MCBs are very small mobile buildings. The one that staff has been non-committal on is the requirement for connection to sanitary sewer. The code changed in the interim since the last application. The code now requires that if a building is larger than 30,000 square feet or generates more than 5,000 gallons a day, that you connect it to sewer. Previously, prior to that change, the applicant had already obtained a permit to build a septic tank for the first building of this proposal. And the majority of the sanitary sewer flow generated by the project is generated by the current users. There's an office there for a roofing company, a tenant on the site, and that space generates the majority of the sanitary flow for the project. The storage buildings have just a couple of bathrooms in each building. They don't really generate much sewer flow. People show up at a storage, they load their stuff and they leave. They don't hang out. So it generates very little flow. So even at build out, we're something like 20% of the required 5,000 gallons, even though our buildings are much, much larger. The flow is very small. So the other issue is, and we'll look at this in some future slides, the connection to the sewer service would require us to extend about a quarter of a mile of pipe to get to the best connection point, not to mention a pumping station, and it's quite a significant investment. And the applicant has agreed once phase 2 is built, he'll make that investment, and the whole entire site would then be connected to sanitary sewer and the septic tanks taken offline. So our request in this deviation is really just to defer that requirement of connection to sanitary sewer until the second phase of this development. The one other item I would mention here, the lift in sewer flow from what's currently there today to the finished product for phase one is roughly 400 gallons a day different. And we'd already, several years ago, were able to get a septic tank permit to handle that flow with an expanded drain field. And 400 gallons a day is roughly really less than 2 homes. So it's very insignificant additional flow created by that building in phase one. So this is a site plan. A couple things I wanted to point out here. Here is that wall that you were looking at on the slides on the rendering. Really, the main gist of this wall is there are some overhead doors in this building here, and this is to really kind of block the view from the road. So this wall sits right in front of that building. And of course, this is the 0.61 acres that we're setting aside for indigenous native habitat. So we didn't extend the wall through that. And then this is the lake that is in existence and kind of weaves in and out of the property. So the wall stopped there as well. This is the 0.6 acres Tim was referring to that we've set aside for indigenous habitat. Also, I want to point out, as I just mentioned, the property line goes all the way out to here, but the development is clear back, to the south. So our sewer connection up here at Mediterra and Old 41, we would be extending a line all the way into here to get to a pump station. So that's where the 1,300 feet comes from. I think it's much closer if you count, the distance from our property line to the connection is not very far. But the fact that we've set aside all of this preserve area makes the actual expense required from where a pump station would sit somewhere in here, is quite significant, roughly 1,200 to 1,300 feet from that connection point to where we would have a connection point on the site. Did want to point out that, we did talk about this as 2 phases. The first phase would be the south building. And we would then use this area where the north building is proposed as open storage until the second building is built. So our proposal would be then to have this temporary septic tank for the first building in this location, and this would be open storage. And then once the second building is built, the septic tank would go away. We'd go onto the pump station and we'd build the second building here. Okay, so the staff has recommended, as I mentioned before, approval. And as Jackie mentioned, this was an opportunity for the city and the applicant to review the previous approval and to look at some of the uses that were approved then and are at this point currently approved. And the applicant has agreed at the city's request to strike basically all of these previously approved uses. And, we had quite a bit of discussion about some of them, but in the end, the applicant has agreed that he would forego all of these uses once this zoning approval moves forward and the development moves forward. As you could see with the location of the site, some of these uses probably wouldn't be viable uses anyway. The site doesn't have much visibility, and some of these uses really would be best on a property that has road visibility. The storage open, that will go away once phase 2 is constructed, but we will continue that open storage in that phase 2 area during phase 1. So these are previously approved, but now being stricken from the approved list of uses. Jackie did mention in the report that we're asking for new uses, and really that's really more of an expansion of the existing use. The current tenant is a contractor or builder of their roofing contractor, and they are currently engaging in some uses that really are group 2 and group 3 of the contractor builder use, and the current approval said group 1. We just really wanted to memorialize that there is some storage out there of materials and vehicles and those sorts of things that are conducive to the residential roofing contractor business. And we wanted to recognize and memorialize those uses. And the applicant would like to continue these uses until phase 2 is developed. And we'd like to continue that whether or not it's the current tenant or, if the current tenant's lease expires and they decide to, have another tenant prior to the development of phase 2. So really not a new use, just an expansion of the current use. So the staff did recommend approval with conditions, and there's, I think, 14 conditions with several sub-conditions of those. And the applicant really does agree with the vast majority of those conditions. But however, the applicant is requesting modification of just a handful. We've even reduced that list yet even this morning. So as we've talked about a couple of things. So I wanted to go through just a couple of these that we really would like to have reworded. The first one is condition 5E, which talks about the construction of that visual buffer along the railroad right-of-way that we've mentioned a couple of times. And the statement, it says should be to block the view. Such devices shall block the view of the overhead doors from the street or any residentially used properties. We think that's a little subjective and maybe a little vague, and we'd rather just say conform to the locations approved on the MCP. And if just backing up to kind of review that, here is the location that we're talking about. There might be some slight view, of a vehicle coming down the highway, might be able to see right through there, see maybe one door just for a few seconds, but that's kind of a subjective thing. There's still a lot of trees along the railroads, a lot of trees out here. So we'd rather have that condition just reworded to say in the location shown on the MCP. We agree to build this, and we just wanted that to be clear in the approval. The second one is there was a condition that when we build the utilities through this corridor here, that is in the indigenous area, that we replant this indigenous area with vegetation that's conducive to the gopher tortoise habitat. And we have no objection to that at all. We just want to make sure, we haven't really vetted this list of vegetation with Bonita Springs Utilities. And we just wanted to add a statement in there that, says, that we agree to plant these unless, any of these species are objectionable to BSU. We just don't want to get ourselves in a position where we have to come back and ask for, another amendment because, BSU says, no, we're not in favor of gallberry being planted over our pipes. So that's a minor technicality. And then number 9F, is a condition which is in here due to the wires, which are structural guy wires that are in association with the towers that are there. The condition requires a clearance bar. We really don't want to do a clearance bar. With what we've proposed on the master site plan, we did some diagrams here, was to place bollards in locations that would prohibit vehicles from going in any of those areas where the clearance is too low. So we've got those bollards placed, and so no vehicles would be able to get over close to those wires. Therefore, we just want to add a statement that gives us that option to provide barriers from the guy wire areas. And then the last condition really wanted to discuss is the previously mentioned condition in reference to the contractor and builder user that is there. We mentioned that, this user, their lease may expire. If phase 2 isn't built at that point, the applicant really wants the flexibility to lease to a similar user. It's an ideal site for that. And so we would like to strike, 12A, which says it's limited to that tenant. It really is more appropriate that the zoning run with the land, not with a tenant. And we also wanted to clarify, the tenant there does some very light fabrication work. And we wanted to recognize that light fabrication would be allowed. in this use to sort of document what's currently going on. But this condition B does prohibit the outdoor storage of heavy equipment, earth moving equipment, mixers, air lift equipment, and several and similar construction equipment. So it's pretty well with the rest of these conditions. It pretty well describes what's going out there currently today, and what we'd like to be able to see stay as a use up until phase 2 is built. Once phase 2 is built, then a lot of this outside storage stuff, there would be no place for it to go. So those are the conditions that we are requesting slight modifications. And so just kind of to summarize, the proposed modification we think is actually much less impact to the neighbors. We are reducing the 5-story building to a 4-story building, which will really affect the visibility in a positive way. Also, the use is slightly less intense than the previous use, and the applicant feels like he's made a pretty good sacrifice in agreeing to strike a number of uses that were previously approved to him. He's voluntarily agreed to at the city's request to strike a number of uses. So we think that the net result of our application is actually should be much less impact to neighbors and the neighborhood. We don't have any environmental impacts. We're preserving this 0.6 of an acre of native vegetation. We are agreeing to extend water to the site, and we will extend sewer to the site in phase 2. And those are significant offsite improvements, both of them. We didn't mention the water, but the water is also a significant offsite improvement. We believe that the setbacks, buffers, and design standards which are proposed are appropriate for the site, and given its location, are appropriate to safeguard views from all sides and from all neighbors who would have any objection to the development. The applicant does request that the zoning board approve the staff recommendations with the minor amendments that we've proposed today. So with that, I would like to defer any of our other time to rebuttal, if any. But before I do that, just want to see if Tim or Mike would like to add anything to the presentation. Tim?
This is Tim, and I would say no. I hope that the adjustments that we made are amenable to the city council, and happy to answer any questions. That's Tim Sheehan. Mike? Sawyer?
I'm sorry, anyone else comment? I have some questions that I'd just like to ask, if that's okay.
Sure. Absolutely.
Can you give me some idea on the timing of phase 2, when you intend to commence it?
I could take a shot at that. I mean, it's really an economic decision a little bit. Obviously, the permit has a life on it that I am not fully aware of what the time windows are. We would prefer to do it sooner rather than later, but it's a fairly large building, the first building that we would build, and we would want to try to get the occupancy of 50 or 60% before we started putting the shovel in the ground for the second building. But the long-term hope is to develop it completely as soon as possible. But we don't really have a window on the forecast with all the things that are going on in the world these days. So
No, I understand. The only concern is, you continue the septic system until that's begun, and anyway, if you can go back to that site map, I would just be interested to see where when I had a septic up in New Jersey, we call it the leaching field. Where does the effluent from the septic system go on this map? Where would we find that field?
So currently, the current field is here, which serves the current tenant, and what we would do is in phase one, we would take and build an expanded bed over here, you know, kind of out of the way of all the new improvements. And the system has a pump already anyway. We take that pump and pump it to this location. This will be a temporary drain field. Once phase two is developed, we would take this drain field out, obviously, and build the second building here.
Where's the pump?
It's Tim, where's the pump?
I think it's to the current pump or the proposed
Current
the
pump,
current
and then you're going to move current pump, and then you're either going to move it or redirect it to the new leak to the new septic system.
Yes, I'll defer to Mike Sawyer. He knows it like the back of his hand. Mike, are you there? Mike? Well, he's probably trying to, he's on the call.
There's Mike. I see his picture, but I think he's muted.
Okay.
Mike has
So-
to unmute himself.
There you
So
are.
the newer septic then would be in closer proximity to the golf course, is that correct? Or homes?
No. Be tucked in between the buildings.
Right. But the current septic is far to the right, closer to the street. The new one you're putting in, isn't that closer in proximity to homes and residential areas behind it?
Arguably, yes. I mean, it's 500 feet from the nearest home across the railroad bed and Old
Right, but
41.
But
it's
to the
not-
north, to the north, that's a golf course, isn't it?
No, to
well,
the north is this preserve area, right?
to the
Right,
east.
but okay,
east
so
is
straight up. What's on the other side of the trees?
straight up is the road.
Yeah. So yeah, you're looking up on this, which is the east.
Okay,
This is a preserve area. And then on the other side of the preserve area is the golf course.
right.
So looking at this view, this is that preserve area. And this is the golf course. And we're about 700 feet from any homes on that side. And the septic would sit kind of in here. So maybe it's even another 100 feet away. Be
Right, but
right here instead of
But
right
you're,
here. Right.
you're still in closer proximity to the golf course than the existing one, because the existing one's
Yeah,
closer to
very,
41.
Yeah, very slightly.
Okay.
Yeah, right here now would move to right here. Yeah.
Is the concern visibility or something else? I mean, it's the fields
Curiosity.
are typically
Curiosity.
a foot or 2 feet above the.
Just issues with close proximity to residential areas, that's all.
Okay. All right.
And then usage areas, golf course, you know, if there were any smell. I know that they've become extremely user friendly or whatever, but yeah. Just a quick question on all you had indicated, I believe, on all the recommendations that you're reducing the property line anywhere from 10 to probably close to 20 feet. Is that correct? So you're building closer to the previous property lines anticipated, correct? Like you're going from 25 to 15, 30 to 8, and 30 to 8, right?
Okay. The 25 to 15 refers to just this buffer line right here. And normally, you know, this 25-foot buffer is here because there's a road here or, you know, another property owner. We already have this 130-foot separation from the railroad. So we're reducing this distance about 10 feet, but we already have a 130-foot spatially buffer here. The other small setbacks have to do with these little small modular buildings that serve these towers. And we already they're already there. I mean, there's one here. They might add a couple in this area, which is the one deviation, but there's already one there. There's already one up here. You know, that's really these small deviations. Most of them refer to these little small buildings, which have equipment in them that's associated with the towers.
They existed before the land development code was enhanced or described. And so we're trying to memorialize the fact that they are within the existing setback requirements. And we're just trying to make sure that's noted on the master site plan, development plan.
But in the change in proposal, you are intending to utilize that additional space, correct?
Yes.
Like you're going from 25 to 15, 30 to 8, and 30 to 8. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then the change in proposal, you are intending to utilize that additional space, correct? 30 to 8.
Some of the modular communication buildings are in place, as Stuart described, and they are also they already are within the existing setbacks. And we would propose, if we put any future ones in, that they would be similarly aligned, which could potentially be within, or would be in the setback along the the east border that borders the wildland, which they're completely invisible to any of the homes in Mediterra. And then that's all.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And question, the change in the pond from 4 to 1 to 2 to 1, can you explain the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, so this is an existing stormwater pond, and there's some areas in the existing banks that are steeper than 4 to 1, and we've proposed in those areas to harden those with GeoWeb, which is a product that basically will stabilize these slopes. The code has a 4 to 1 requirement. The pond's been there for many, many years with a steeper than 4 to 1 slope. It's never been a problem before, but we've agreed to, and we've been dealing with the city staff, the engineers there. So we've agreed to go into these areas. And one area we've already hardened with some riprap, but the other areas that are steeper than 4 to 1, we propose those to be hardened with GeoWeb, which is another product to prevent future erosion. So really, it's just to recognize the condition that already exists in this lake.
I have a question regarding the apparent increase in the impervious land area, and whether it be staff or the applicant. I'm just kind of curious, was any consideration given to stormwater runoff because, again, of the increase in the impervious areas with asphalt buildings, et cetera? Just a curious question.
Sure, and yes, we have addressed that. We will be enhancing this lake, and we'll be adding some other stormwater areas around the site in different locations in order to capture that additional runoff. A good bit of this site is already impervious. There's a north yard here that's where some outside equipment is being stored that's hardened already. This area has been hardened already mostly as well, and this parking lot exists here. So there's actually not a large amount of additional impervious being added, but there is consideration for that. We've done extensive drainage stormwater models and analysis, and we will be turning those analyses into the city staff for review, and also to the South Florida Water Management District. We've met with them 2 or 3 times now. So yeah, I think there's been some extensive work, and will be plenty more work before we turn any dirt out here to ensure that we've properly recognized the additional impervious surfaces and met all the regulations in regards to additional stormwater storage.
All right, one last question, just put my mind at ease as far as sewer is concerned. If for some reason phase 2 doesn't happen, you then intend to continue with the septic system, is that correct? Or would you talk to Bonita Springs Utilities and maybe try to hook up? I mean, I know it's a theoretical question, but what do you think?
It's possible, I guess, in the future. I mean, think about our goal is to develop it. There's an economic benefit to develop the North Yard, so yeah, there's a lot of financial incentive per se to get that done, and it's always been our intent to do it. But there is just a little bit of, a fair amount of uncertainty in the world these days, and to go and build these 2 large buildings right off.
Maybe that was an unfair question.
Yeah, no, it was no. It's
I understand the economic situation of the whole thing, and I mean, so. All right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a cogent answer, and really at this stage in time, you really cannot not commit.
Yeah, and one other thing I will say about it is it's extremely low flow Stuart mentioned possibly 2 houses. I don't even think it's that, because there's literally no showers in
Mhm.
any buildings, even the existing buildings. So you have maybe 8 or 10 toilets in the whole complex, and that's it. So you don't have sinks and drains and disposals and all that kind of stuff. It's really, really very, very, very low water usage and very, very low septic creation. And we've never had a problem with the existing site with the septic field. We've never had a smell complaint, or we've never had a failure, or we've never had any kind of, flow problems. So we know that if we remodify it, which is maybe the existing field is maybe 10 years old, we're in better shape. And possibly, to answer your question, if there is, we come back and there is some interim use, we'll probably connect it. But it is a, many hundreds of thousands of dollar project for extremely low flow. And that's really the basis for the trying to put it on.
And that flow would also include any wastewater from cleaning of equipment and things like that. You factored that in when you look at the flow, correct?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the cleaning of equipment wouldn't flow to the sewer. I don't think it would be runoff, but there were pre-treatment swales all around the site based on the city's code. And the pre-treatment swales contain all the water until it would flow into the lake, and hence it would flow out of the lake. So in the, in a major storm.
Okay. Thank you.
Tony,
Yes.
this is Russ Wynn. Just one
Hello,
question.
Russ.
Hello. Any community feedback? I know from the community, just interesting.
Yes, I can take that. We did have a community meeting at the St. Leo Church.
Mhm.
We had folks from both Spanish Wells and Mediterra, and we were pleasantly surprised that there weren't any, vehement reaction to the project. And like I said, it's been there a long time, the commercial site, and I do think that there are people that appreciate the fact that this is a quasi service of the community. People like convenient storage at reasonable prices, and small business incubator type of product that makes things their air conditioner guy closer or their roofing guy closer. So there wasn't any significant feedback, and we did also reach out to Councilwoman Carr, who is in the district, and I don't want to mischaracterize her reaction, but I thought it was extremely positive, both from a job creation, amenities. She liked the look of the building, the architectural, which we worked extensively with city architect Sam Vincent over the years. So I don't want to misrepresent what she said, but my interpretation from her was very positive.
As a matter of fact, if I may, in all that background equipment, the only comment we saw as a result of the St. Leo's meeting was positive. If I remember correctly, it was approved.
That's correct.
That
Yes.
was what was checked. So,
Yes, and both people from Spanish Wells and Mediterra there. We had a long conversation. I was there personally, and there was questions about this and that. They were very happy that it was going from 50 feet down to 40 feet.
Yep.
That was real positive, and they liked the look of the building, and there was no real negative feedback. And if you look at the picture slides, which we showed them, and it's pretty easy for them to do the same homework. If they look from the golf course at Mediterra or across the street at Spanish Wells, the site is very well screened right now, and there will be some tree removal and replacement, but at net, I think the site's gonna be pretty well hidden relative to other large storage facilities on Bonita Beach Road and the like. And it will be a Class A facility, so it will be a net amenity, visual amenity.
Very good.
I would also point out that there were several uses that we agreed to strike after the public neighborhood meeting, so they didn't even have the benefit of that information. But there's been so many of those uses that could have impacts to the neighbors that have now been eliminated from the approvals, which puts them in a much better situation.
So I was going to actually ask a question on that regarding the removal of the prior uses. So why were they removed? Like, pet services, groomers and things like that are, very popular, landscaping. Why were those particular ones removed? Was it at people's direction or recommendation?
That was really the staff recommendation. We would have preferred to retain all of them because they're all potential, tenants of the property. But it was, a healthy give and take with Jackie and her associates. Why would you need this? And, interestingly, one of the thoughts that we had actually received from at the St. Leo meeting, because storage, the bus depot was actually on the list at the time. And one of the comments from the folks that attended the meeting were, about the potential rail trail and parking being an issue in downtown Bonita Springs. It would be a great site to have a park and ride, a park and bike up into the downtown. And we actually went back and forth with Jackie quite a bit about that. And, it would be nice to have a little trolley and a park and ride there. But that was kind of a, give and take. And so these items, we just, one by one, acquiesce with Jackie, and we could see that certain things wouldn't be great. We think certain things like research and development would be good, but and possibly we could go back to the city in the future if there was a potential user and ask for that to be granted. But we're okay with what it's generally going to be a storage site with some incubator type of bays on the first floor, and I think there's enough businesses that are really low impact that will be able to fill the use. So it wasn't scientific, but it was input from Jackie and her team as to what
okay. Yeah, the lawn and garden supply store, pet services, pet shop, and plant nursery seemed to it just kind of struck me as odd, but okay.
Yeah, the plant nursery, for example, there was Tropical Gardens was a tenant there for 7 or 8 years. There was a nursery after the television station left. Tropical Gardens was there. The sign was maybe within the last 4 or 5 years actually taken down, but there was an active drive-up nursery, retail nursery there, retail and wholesale nursery for 6 or 7 years on the site. So when we got the original approval, and these uses are currently approved for the site as we speak, but we've acquiesced that would probably unlikely that there'll ever be a plant nursery there, so why not take it off? So
on that note, Tony, may I ask a question? Ben Hershenson, would it be appropriate for us to hear from staff as to the rationale as to why some of these uses were eliminated? I'm kind of curious about that because if they were there before and they aren't approved now, there has to be a justification for that. So is it possible to get an explanation?
Yeah, I would recommend, just for the flow of the meeting, that we wait till staff gives their presentation and ask them
Okay,
to
that's
address
what I
it.
thought. Okay, that's fine.
Hi, Tony, one question, Bruce Galloway.
Yeah, Bruce.
Has the applicant by any chance talked to the railroad about the future use of that property? Because they seem to be relying on other surrounding properties to provide the buffers and the visual separation from surrounding uses. But the railroad is a key part of that. Is there any idea about the future of that property?
the railroad? Well, so we have had discussions with the railroad. I mean, historically, we have a right-of-way agreement with the railroad, a crossing agreement that goes back 10 years or so, which I negotiated with them. And they understand that there is already self-storage to the south, which is a I don't want to say applicant, but co-participant in that crossing lease. We have told them they're aware of this project, and we've communicated they have most of what you see in this package. We don't know what their future use is. We were told along the way that there is, potential that the city of Bonita Springs might want to put a rail trail in there or some other amenity, community amenity, which would be great. The property that's between Old 41 and the railroad track is not owned by us. I had the option to buy it when I bought the original property, but didn't see a real commercial value to it. And can't speak for that individual, what his plans are. I think he was going to try to put a farm or a nursery in there, a farm stand, but I don't think he's actually pursuing that at the moment. I can't speak for him. But as far as the railroad, it's business as usual. Difficult to get any knowledge of what they might do with it. I mean, that's obviously not something that they would.
Is it an actual active railroad?
Well,
do they run trains on it, or?
I haven't seen trains go down it for 5 or 8 years, and I would be horrified if a train did go down it, because
Right.
I know people actually actively can hand remove the railroad ties from the steel rails and collect them or do what they're going to do with them. But
Use them to build walls. Yeah.
yeah, I mean the ties are seriously degraded, but they maintain that it's an active railway and they have the right to do whatever. And they're really federally regulated, I believe.
Just a question for information.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of just elaborate on that a little bit. One of the things I wanted to mention is, this indigenous area is being left as is, and that provides quite a bit of visual buffer. And then we're building this buffer here. The only place that we're not really building a buffer is where this lake kind of goes in and out of the railroad property. This is the only place that we're not providing a heavy buffer, because it's just physically not possible. The lake kind of goes out into here. So other than that, we're providing, especially from this building, which is the one with the doors, is going to be pretty much behind this wall and blocked by this vegetation on our own property, and this wall and trees that we're building on our own property here. This other building is set very far back and is hidden from almost any view, but just because of the angles and where these other buildings sit, in reference to the road, et cetera.
Any other questions?
Yes, Gary Gambrell here, one of the new guys. Stuart, towards the end of your presentation, you said something about conform to MCP. It may have been in the neighborhood of the plants. One of your later slides.
This one?
Oh, there you go. Conform to location shown on the approved MCP.
Which is this, and this is the location right here.
MCP is an acronym for?
The master conceptual plan, which is this plan
Master
right
conceptual plan. See, it's
Yep.
one of the new guy questions. Okay, got it. Please go back to that.
Okay.
Conform to MCP slide.
Yeah, there you go.
The
It's
next
the
slide
layout.
may have been talking about plants being objectionable to Bonita Springs utilities.
Correct.
Don't use plants objection. There you go. Appropriate plants shall be gopher, apple, wiregrass, blah, 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 blah. Make sure they're not objectionable to Bonita Springs utilities. So this may be a question for the staff when we get to Jackie. But are you using any other lists of invasive exotics that are prohibited to make sure you stay away from them? For example, Florida's got a list out of exotic pest plant control. If you rely on just Bonita, and Jackie, chime in anytime. If we rely on just Bonita Springs utilities, that may not be an extensive enough list.
Yeah, for the record, Jacqueline Genson, and I do have Laura Gibson here as well, and she can elaborate, but what this plant list is intended to do is to provide proper gopher tortoise plant habitat. So it's species that they can eat. And so on the plan, what Mr. Rogers had showed is that there's a water line extension along the, let me get my bearings here, the westerly portion, which is adjacent to the indigenous area. So as part of that replanting plan, we want to make sure that there's species that the gopher tortoises would enjoy eating.
And Laura knows I know all about gopher tortoises.
Yes.
I hear her
And
laughing now. Back to Stuart. The equipment list of what's going to be there. I think I saw aerial. If you find that slide again.
The aerial with the photo.
I'm not sure it was a photo. It was a narrative. It was a text slide.
Oh,
And it was talking about types of equipment that were going to be there. That was my question. It's what it is going to be there.
Okay, so that was on the probably 12. This one.
There we go.
Apologize. It's a delay. It's a delay. It'll be there in a minute.
Got it.
There it is. There it is.
So 12.
Yeah, so
12B is 12B, C, D, and E is excluded equipment or included equipment?
So
So
B.
I may.
Go ahead.
So this is actually a staff recommended condition. So what this is, as Mr. Rogers had alluded to, the contractor and builder group 3 use is technically a new use that we're adding to the schedule of uses. But when you go to the land development code and you look at the actual permissible uses of a contractor and builder group 3, it's your heavy construction equipment that can be stored outside, not enclosed within a building. So staff's intent was to allow the Kelly roofing operation to exist, because we did work with the property owner a few years ago to allow that tenant in under a different classification of the code. So in order to go ahead and memorialize it properly, we went ahead and did that, but understanding if we allow this use in this zoning document, what the repercussions could be. So that's why we went ahead and put this outdoor storage prohibition of this heavy construction equipment. So we don't want to see the cranes, the concrete mixers, huge aerial lift equipment with the booms up in the air. That's not what the neighborhood meeting portrayed. I know that's not what they want to do. So we want to definitely make sure, should Mr. Sheehan decide to sell the property, because zoning runs with the land, and even though they're a great operator and property owner now, property ownership changes. So again, because the zoning runs with the land, we thought this would be an appropriate compromise.
Understood.
All right.
One last one, and this is probably for Tim or Stuart. When this started, you had a long list of schedule of uses, and I understand, and I heard you use the term you acquiesced and cut back on the schedule of uses. And from a planning aspect, I think I like the idea of cutting back on schedule of the uses, such that if something unanticipated wants to be a tenant, or you want to bring in somebody that's unanticipated, that this at least gives the city, the zoning board, the opportunity to look at it again and say, oh, okay, bring it in.
That's always the case.
Always the case. All right, so that's really my question.
And ask for that to be changed, I would imagine. And then it
Yeah.
would be up to the
That's
staff and the board then to approve any particular type of additional use.
So
Am I
Tony, that was
correct,
you,
exactly?
that's Tony saying that's always the case. And my question with Tim is, how difficult a decision was this for you to cut back? How odd is it in your development experience throughout the rest of the country?
Well, it's pretty significant, but you know, it was a good give and take with Jackie and the team. I mean, there was a lot of existing conditions. This, whole approval was all in place, and we feel like it was a good give and take with the planning group, Jackie's group, to come up with this. And I appreciate the fact that the board is would be willing. I hope you guys are still in place if we come back, in the near future, sometime in the future, and say, hey, we'd really like to put a small wood shop in one of these buildings or something. I don't know. We're not trying to be a detriment to the neighborhood, but when there's small businesses that need space to try to grow their business, to support the community, there's not a lot of places that they can go. There's, commercial, real, whatever, small business incubator is really, really tight in the area. I'm well aware of it. I know a lot of the other developers, and the statistics are really kind of challenging, for small business guys or women to try to, open their businesses. So, we don't see farm equipment sales or a plant nursery to be there. So, we're okay with moving on with it. But certainly,
on the other hand, Tim, I guess when you go out to seek tenants, you will have these restrictions in mind, and hopefully you'll be able to find tenants with businesses that don't conflict with this. I would imagine that would be the goal.
Absolutely, yeah. That would. But say if somebody came along and had wanted to put a recording studio in there, and we went to the town and said, look, there's not going to be a noise problem. They're going to close the door and record music or something, or do some type of musical development work. I think
those could all be reviewed. Those could all be reviewed ad hoc. Huh?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
So that we felt that was with Jackie, that she said that to us. If you really need one of these uses in the future, come and talk to us. So
absolutely, if there's rationale for it.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me for interrupting, but I thought with this, I don't want to go against what the rules are, but it seems to me we're into discussion of this list of uses that have been eliminated. And I mean, is it wrong to ask Jackie now to explain why, since we're on the subject? It kind of flows to have an appropriate response as to why some uses were eliminated. I'm very curious about that, and I haven't heard any justification for it as yet.
They were negotiated away.
Well, this Kelly Macklin, I agree. I'd like to understand when you said that they're negotiated away. It's just the ones that are on here. Just some of them seem odd, and it's more inquisitive, trying to understand. Again, you get back to pet services. I mean, especially in Florida. I mean, everybody likes to have a place to take and have their pet groomed. So it just seems some of them seem kind of odd. So we're wanting to understand what the give and take was.
And I think that a lot of these can be explained when Jackie does do her presentation, which does need to happen before we get too much further into the debate. So I don't know how many more questions you have for the applicant, but when those are finished, I know that Jackie has something she can present to you, and we'll be happy to answer any questions after that aren't covered in that presentation.
Gary Gambrell here. I'm done with my questions for Tim and Stuart, and you guys, Tim and Stuart, I appreciate your sticking to it and following us through year after year after year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That as a compliment.
We're ready for Jackie's presentation?
No, can I ask the question?
Sure.
Thank you. The applicant didn't talk about the entrance road and the modifications that have to occur there and the connection to 41. And is the applicant familiar with the requirements that staff has outlined for the work that they have to do, which I would assume happens at phase 1?
Yeah, that's correct. I'll take that. Yeah. So, typically it's a little bit premature during the zoning to do too much level of detail on those kinds of engineering things. But we understand that we do have to do a traffic study that the city needs to review, the DOT needs to review it. And that traffic study will dictate what improvements are required at Old 41. So we are aware that's another hurdle that we have to cross at some point. But at this point, we needed to firm up the uses because those uses get plugged into the traffic studies. So that's kind of where we are now.
We understand that, and most of those questions be resolved at the time of development order, as many of the other questions that we've asked today will be resolved at the development order stage for the city. But one last question I would like to ask you is that you're putting before this board 5 different modifications to the conditions that were outlined, that are outlined in the presentation that we've received. Why weren't these 5 modifications negotiated with the city, with the staff before they got to us?
We've been negotiating with staff for, I think, about 2 years. And, you know, we received this final set of conditions just a few days ago, and we have been on the phone discussing them with Jackie. But at that point, it was too late to, you know, to modify the actual staff report and get them memorialized there. And some of them she really wanted to defer to, you know, to the board. So that's why they weren't, you know, resolved in the report itself.
So you're asking the members of this board to negotiate these 5 items with you? Is that, you know, that could take a while?
Well, let's, you know, I think with Jackie's input that, you know, the staff may, you know, may agree with some of these. We'll wait and see what she says when she makes her presentation.
I agree. That would be the next step, and we'll let Jackie weigh in on those conditions.
If I could interject to help Stuart, because Stuart had, because of the length of the project, Stuart came in after another principal of his firm had done. We have done a traffic study, and historically, self-storage is a very low traffic generator, very, very low relative to a shopping plaza or something like that. And we are aware of the Bonita Streetscape program and the enhancements we would have to make to Channel 30 Drive. So there's been some meaningful work done in that area. Unfortunately for Stuart, he may not be aware of it, but traffic study was completed. I think Old 41 is considered a failed road anyways, because of the high traffic on it. But we're aware of what the responsibilities are, including throughout the project, the appropriate walkways with the Bonita Springs street program. So all that is engineered into the site, sidewalks and access type things.
Okay, time for Jackie.
All right, great.
Jackie.
Thank you. Addison, if I can share my screen.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. Fabulous. All right, let me move some things around so I can see. Okay. All right, thank you, Chairman and board members. New board members, welcome. This is the staff presentation for the Channel 30 CPD amendment. Like I always try to communicate to the board, especially for my new members, areas where the applicant and I have overlapped on data and information, I'll go ahead and note so, but if you want me to elaborate, I'm happy to do so. But I'm trying to be very cautious of your time. Part of the staff review team was myself as the lead planner for the comprehensive plan and land development code consistency for the zoning chapter. I also have Trisha Goff here. She's one of our professional engineers who did the review of Chapter 3. We have Laura Gibson, our environmental specialist. Sean Gibbons did our bicycle pedestrian coordination. Jay Sweet is our city surveyor and also a professional planner. Tom Ross is our traffic engineer that reviews traffic impact statements at time of zoning. We also had Public Works as part of the request. We have Sam Vincent, who is participating by phone. He does our architectural reviews for the city. And also, Bonita Springs Utilities was a review entity on this request, as well as Collier County, given the close proximity to the Collier County line. In terms of the request, staff did recommend approval with conditions, essentially to modify the height and the square feet of the modular communications buildings and intensity. The request, as I stated earlier, does modify the master concept plan. And again, because it was an amendment to an existing zoning ordinance, it allowed us to reevaluate the prior 2009 zoning ordinance for consistency with current regulations. In terms of areas of disagreement, which you heard a little bit about today, it seemed to be that we just had some minor concerns or disagreements on condition 12, but of course, as Mr. Rogers explained today, there are some other areas that we're happy to work through as the case proceeds through the process. This is a location map from staff's perspective. It has the aerial view. It has future land use map designation, which is the purple color. That is the industrial future land use category of the city. And then surrounding it, you have the moderate density mixed use plan development category. And that category was created mainly for our gated communities, whether they were residential in nature or had some type of commercial component. Zoning, you have the commercial plan development that currently resides on the property. You have the residential plan development of Mediterra to the east, zoned agricultural property to the west, but also has a comp plan designation of moderate density mixed use plan development. And then you have the Spanish Wells community of Cordova. In terms of existing uses, Mr. Rogers covered that pretty well in his presentation with the indigenous preserve of Mediterra directly to the east, the golf course. And on the other side, you have the Gulf Railroad right-of-way for the railroad. Again, an agriculturally zoned property where there's some exotic removal done. We're not sure what the property owner is intending to do with the property, but he is in direct negotiations with staff. Then you have the Old 41 right-of-way, and then the actual residential neighborhood of Cordova. Just some entitlement history, as we explained earlier throughout the applicant's presentation, there was a nursery initially granted a special exception to reside on the property. That was done in 2001. In 2008, the city reclassified the property from the moderate density mixed use plan development category to industrial. So that's why you see that this property actually has a purple classification of industrial, because they changed that in 2008. In 2009, the City Council had approved the commercial plan development, which we are amending today. Throughout the course of the past decade, some changes to the site when they were doing the tower replacement actually necessitated administrative action to go ahead and make some slight modifications to the master concept plan. So that was what we did in the 2013 case and the 2016 case. And in 2018, we went ahead and allowed for some impacts to the indigenous preserve to go ahead and bring in the potable water line. And that was allowed and contemplated as part of the 2009 zoning ordinance. And as I also explained in my introduction, that the case has filed several site permits to go ahead and make those tower modifications, accommodate the Kelly roofing tenants, and some other site upgrades. Mr. Rogers went over this as well, the master concept plan. This is actually the existing master concept plan that was approved in 2009. So as you can see, there's really not many changes that you can actually physically tell other than the building heights are changing and some setbacks to the south property line. This is the proposed master concept plan, sheet 1. So again, you'll see I just circled this building because of the building height in this area will increase by 10 feet and 1 story. And then on this area here, that's where you have the reduction of the 1 story and 10 feet and also a greater setback distance from the south property line. So those are the pretty big substantial changes. The other is the addition of this sheet 2 of the master concept plan. And this is to allow the Kelly roofing tenant to go ahead and remain on the property until such time the economics support the property owner to go ahead and erect that second building. So what I did is I just circled this area for the contractor builder group 3 use or the open storage use. And here I have just an aerial from our permitting software that shows probably earlier last year what the property looked like. I do understand there has been some minor site work based on some existing permits that we have issued for the Kelly roofing use, but those are the main distinctions with the 2 new master concept plans. Schedule uses. So let's talk about those schedule uses. So we went ahead and modified condition 3A of the 2009 ordinance. And so why we did that? Based on a workshop that was done, I believe it was like 2017, 18, there was a joint workshop between the City Council and the Zoning Board. And it came about based on a plan development that was done in the interchange. And there was concern that There were too many uses. There wasn't enough specificity on a master concept plan. So that workshop was to go ahead and discuss some of those issues. And what that kind of raised some concerns about is the board at the time was worried that we were approving plans and zoning documents where people didn't know what they wanted to build. Some terms that we heard was, this is all speculation. So the reason why staff went ahead and looked at these uses is we looked under it based on that direction and those concerns voiced by the zoning board and council based on prior directions. So when you look at the current master concept plan that's proposed before us, you see 2 storage buildings. So a lot of those uses that we recommended that they remove were uses that they possibly couldn't really fit on that site based on the actual design of the site, how it was parked. So that's the lens that staff went ahead and reevaluated those uses. It was a long laundry list of uses from 2009, and was it really appropriate based on the plans that we saw in front of us today? So in condition 3A, you'll see that strike-through indicates the removal of uses, and the underline of text indicates either an addition of a use or some type of supplemental language to go ahead and condition how that use might evolve on that property. The development regulations, that's in condition 3B. So again, in strike-through format and underline, you will see what has changed and what has been removed. But really the big changes are the reduction in the height of this building here and the increase in height in this building and the setback. So those are the big changes in condition 3B that you will see tied to the master concept plan. In terms of neighborhood compatibility, again, we go back to that use chart and things that we look at when you look at a rezoning of property. You know, compatibility is a big item that we look at. You know, what the applicant is asking for, how do we address compatibility from that? So we look at the surrounding areas and the uses that are being requested or the property development regulations. And one of our comprehensive plan policies is when you have a more intense use or an inconsistent use next to residential, how do you evaluate buffers? How do you evaluate intensity? How do you evaluate height? So those are all those factors that we looked into as part of this request. And I won't belabor the table because Mr. Rogers went over that as well. So compatibility considerations. So as I view it, we went ahead and looked at that from a staff standpoint in condition 3, which is your uses and your development regulations. Condition 5, which is your architectural. Condition 6 is a signage condition. Because they are viewable from residential neighborhoods, we went ahead and put a prohibition in on lit signage. So we wouldn't have lighting impacts to those neighborhoods. And then we also placed the limits on the contractor and builder group for use. If I can back up real quick on the architectural design, I know before this meeting, our city architect was in coordination with the applicant's agent, and some of those conditions relative to architecture, we are amenable to working with those conditions. So whether or not the board wants us to do that today, or we can work on it before we get to first reading, before city council, I believe there's definitely some agreement that we can modify those conditions based on this Old 41 right-of-way buffer that was presented to the staff. And Mr. Vincent can answer those questions if you have any after the conclusion of the presentation. So we do have Ms. Gibson here with us, but I'll go ahead and cover her considerations, which was environmental and landscaping. Those are enumerated in conditions 7 and 8. So you'll see new conditions about heritage tree survey requirements, methods for exotic removal, and the maintenance of the preserve areas in the open space, replanting of the gopher tourist preserve, the requirement of a conservation easement, how we're going to handle preserve management, special precautions for the twisted air plant. You'll see the conditions in there about the modular communication building setbacks. What that really deals with is wildland mitigation with the fire department. The fire department does not review zoning petitions, so we went ahead and processed the deviation, knowing that at time of local development order, they'll work very closely with the fire department on a wildland mitigation plan to go ahead and allow those buildings to be so close to those preserve areas, and also the adjacent property from Minotera, because there's a preserve to the east. In terms of the utility easement question, we answered that earlier by Board Member Gambrell in terms of why we have a requirement in there for the replanting of that preserve area. And then also we have a buffers conditions in terms of native plants, our preferred species for planting in our buffers. So those conditions are in 7 and 8. We have utility and stormwater considerations. Those are in conditions 4 and 9. So it was already touched on earlier about the timing of the central water connection. So that's enumerated in condition 4 based on a deviation request. And that was also a condition in the 2009 zoning document. And I'll go into that more under the deviation section of why we requested a deviation. Other conditions you'll see is relative to the existing lake. As Mr. Rogers had explained, you do have an existing lake that does not meet code. So in order to go ahead and allow for modifications, we went ahead and put in conditions to go ahead and do that. So obviously improvements will require coordination with the railroad. We want to make sure that there's proper bank stabilization because we have been having some issues with erosion control in other parts of the city. So we just want to make sure based on the current slope and design of the lake that it is properly stabilized and properly maintained. You will see a condition in there on drainage techniques. It's kind of what I call a boilerplate condition that allows us to use gutters, drains, bubblers at time of development order because a lot can change from zoning and actually when they go through district permitting. You'll also see a condition on guide wire conflict mitigation. And I do understand that's an area that the applicant would like to work with staff on with the clearance bars and the bollards. I would just ask that we allow the opportunity for staff and the applicant to work on that because we're just not sure if we'd be really comfortable with doing that today, but we are amenable to working towards a solution that could be amicable to both parties. And as explained earlier, the request, because the fire department does not review these petitions, everything is subject to their review at time of development order. Multimodal and transportation. So we had Mr. Gibbons, who is our bike ped coordinator, review the petition for consistency with our bicycle pedestrian master plan. And you'll see a condition in there about sidewalks and pay and lieu fee mitigation for those improvements. Again, something that we can evaluate at time of development order. We also had a condition in there that you may have received your zoning, but you still have to submit a traffic analysis at time of local development order to see if their project requires any site-related improvements based on their trip generation. This application, based on an attachment in our staff report, which is attachment A, it was also viewed by Collier County because of the close proximity to the border. Collier County definitely would like some more data and analysis at time of local development order permitting. So we will definitely share the application with them at time of development order, but we didn't place any specific conditions in our document because we didn't think it was appropriate. This is within the city limits, and the city definitely has a different vision and plan for how we handle the movement of people within our jurisdiction. So just wanted to go ahead and put that on the record. Other factors that we looked at was parking. There is a condition, which is condition 13 on parking. They did receive a parking deviation previously. We are maintaining that parking deviation and definitely allow that to occur so long as any type of outdoor storage or any type of use that would require storage of fleets is not parked in a required parking space. So that's why it's conditioned that way. Comprehensive plan considerations, as many of you may know, the first thing we always look at in terms of a petition is consistency with the comprehensive plan. So in this instance, when we evaluated this request based on the future land use element, we looked at the industrial land use category because that's what it is designated. And in terms of the use and the intensity, they met those criteria. Talked about the minimization of incompatibility techniques. So we definitely addressed that, and the applicant has addressed that in terms of lowering intensity on one edge of the building. They're implementing buffer standards. If they're not code required, they are modified to still meet that same intent. So that has been evaluated as part of this request. There's also a policy in there about environmental sensitive lands. This request is not impacting additional environmentally sensitive lands. In fact, we are actually requesting further protections with the conservation easement to protect those indigenous lands. In terms of Objective 1.14, this is an infill project. So it's definitely something we like to see instead of greenfield development out east. So this is an infill project. So this is a great source for infill development. Deviations. So deviations are covered in page 4 through 6 of your staff report. And Mr. Rogers went over those as well. The deviations include some from Chapter 3, which are technical deviations. And what that means is there's a different set of criteria that staff evaluates. They're more based on engineering practices. So it's a technical deviation, but we go ahead and address them now because it's better to do it now so the plan is holistic versus doing it at time of local permitting, development permitting. The other deviations you see are Chapter 4 deviations where the evaluation criteria is 2 criteria. Does it enhance the plan development, and is it not a detriment to the public health, safety, and welfare? And the deviations that you'll see, as Mr. Rogers went over already, is the eastern buffer. That was a previously approved deviation, but it had to be modified because in 2017, the city approved self-storage regulations. And those regulations required greater buffer standards, whether or not they were width, the type of plantings, proximity to residential uses, visibility from residential uses. So that's why those modifications had to be done. The parking deviation, as previously explained, is existing, no changes. The south buffer was modified, again, because of a new plan, and then we have the location of the SPL power line. So again, we have to go ahead and reevaluate those because now SPL has planting guidelines. So, so things just had to be modified. Sanitary sewer. So what's unique about that is while it is a new deviation, it's really not a new standard. So what happened is in 2009, the City Council approved a condition that essentially allowed the deviation. So in this instance, we were more so conducting or having them request this deviation as a formality. So the council in 2009 did approve a different standard that allowed them to connect to central water and sewer at a different point in time. For us, as part of this petition, the reason why we went ahead and had them do this deviation is, number one, we thought that was what should have been done in 2009. But number two, City Council has a list of strategic priorities, and water quality is one of them. And given the heightened sensitivity to blue-green algae and just water quality and the city hiring a water steward, we just felt that it was the best practice to go ahead and have the applicant do that. We definitely understand the applicant's predicament about the size of the facility. It's a low waste generator. So we went ahead and prepared the deviation justification and a condition should City Council want to go ahead and grant that. The applicant has secured their health department permits. I'm hoping it's based on best management practices. I'm sure it is. So just to give you some feedback on why we have proceeded in that manner. The western buffer, similar reason to evaluate based on the eastern, because we have self-storage regulations in place. And also it helps with the modified storage requirements for architectural design. The wildland buffer is a new deviation. As I explained, the fire department doesn't review zoning petitions, so we want to go ahead and put that in place. Indigenous buffer, that is a new requirement, or deviation rather, that we're going ahead and memorializing. And then with the water management slope, that's a new deviation. So as the applicant stated, we went ahead and reviewed the justifications and found them to meet the standards and recommended approval as such and included in the staff report. The findings. So the next 2 slides are the findings for plan development rezonings. That's on page 52 of the document. And so these are the regulations that we as staff and ultimately the zoning board bases their recommendation on to bring to council. So based on this amendment, we found that the applicant has shown that they're consistent with these regulations. And that is why we recommended our conditions, and we recommended approval of the deviations, and ultimately recommended the request as outlined in the staff report. So those are the findings. And that concludes our presentation. Staff is here if you have any questions. And if there's, and let me know at any time if you want me to go over the condition modifications for the applicant.
So now, Mr. Chair, just for the advantage of everyone who's new, that, you know, feel free to ask questions of staff, go back to the applicant, ask any questions. We'll have a brief period of time where we'll open it up to see if we've received any public comment or anyone who wishes to speak on the item. But essentially, you're looking at those findings that Jackie just outlined in the staff report. I believe they're on page 53 of the staff report, and determining whether or not the zoning board is going to recommend this amendment to the city council. You are free also to make recommendations as to both the applicant's requests, the deviations, and staff conditions. And sort of all of that in line with making sure it meets those review criteria.
Eric, may I ask you a question, Eric?
Sure.
Would it be appropriate for the zoning board to say, look, the applicant has asked that some of these conditions be modified rather than the planning board take the burden of deciding those because they're very technical and environmental? Would it be possible for us to approve this and send these questions back to Jackie to negotiate with the applicant, and then if they do agree on that, would they have to come back to us, you know, or would they be able to do that on their own? In other words, could the staff and the applicant agree that those modifications, those conditions could be modified without having to come back to us? That's
yes. I mean, it's very common for an applicant and staff, having heard the discussions at the zoning board, to further amend their proposals, either for staff to make changes to their recommendations, or for the applicant to agree to certain conditions, or just for the ease of everyone, you know, think of the zoning board as a rough trial, and if it's very complicated for everyone, then there's always a tendency to sort of resolve that issue. What I would say is, you know, based on your conversation so far, the big concern seems to be the additional uses. The applicant has basically agreed to the revised list of uses, but, you know, is open to having some of them restored so that they don't have to come through the rezoning process again should conditions change and tenants change. You know, what we've generally seen is that as Ms. Gensen pointed out, the reason why staff recommended removing those uses is not because they in so much of themselves are objectionable uses, but either because the project as designed really wouldn't accommodate those uses, or because the prior zoning board and city council have said, you know, we want to have fairly good idea what you're actually going to develop on a piece of property, and don't want to see, you know, huge lists of uses and changes over time. So, you know, that really kind of came down as a policy prescription from the prior zoning board and city council. And, you know, this zoning board is free to make its own recommendations as to that.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, Derek. My sense is this, and I have no problem with what Tony has recommended, but I would like to see some emphasis on some more discussion that I'm comfortable with respect to staff's agreement as well as the applicant, to try to do something more flexible with respect to the approved uses. Again, boards change, councils change, conditions change. And I think I would like to see whether or not there would be anything else, but I'm open to the idea and very comfortable with allowing the applicant on the whole issue of uses, approved uses, to kind of continue discussing that. And, you know, whatever they decide, for me personally, I'm sure it's going to be within.
Ben, I think those are the two most competent parties.
So I'm willing to go along with that, and I like to see more in the way of uses continue to be discussed.
I think the most competent parties to decide those issues are the staff and the applicant, rather than us. That's my opinion.
I mean, I'm just going to get your recommendation. What you could do if you find that everything else with the project as proposed is consistent with the requirements for the rezoning, you could make a recommendation that it be considered, and that staff and the city council consider adding back some of the original uses. And it's just that simple. And that gives staff and the applicant some time and direction to work on that. And it gives an indication to the city council where the zoning board was thinking.
This is Kelly Macklin. Just I've got a quick question. Jackie, on the I guess the uses under contractors, on your presentation, did you indicate that contractor 3 was not desired?
No, so the history behind that is you have Kelly Roofing that's there now, and the current zoning allows contractor and builder group 1. And what that is it's a contractor, but they're fully within a building. The existing zoning also allows outdoor storage. So how we went ahead and approved the allowance of Kelly Roofing to actually be there was we said, okay, they're a contractor builder group 1 because they're occupying a space of indoor occupancy that, there's an existing building there, so they're there. But they also have a fleet and some trucks that are stored outside. So that's how we were able to be creative, based on prior city manager direction, to go ahead and allow a tenant there. But really, when you look at the code, the best classification of that use is a contractor builder group 3. Now, when you go to the land development code and you look at what that really is, it could open the door to a lot more intense uses other than Kelly Roofing, who's a residential contractor. They have smaller trucks in their fleet. They really don't have a lot of boom arms. They do residential work versus commercial work. So the visual impacts are different. So that's why I went ahead and said, okay, we'll go ahead and allow Kelly Roofing to be there, as they should have been properly permitted, but only under a certain limit of conditions. And that's why I prepared condition 12, is because I added contractor builder group 3 to the uses, but I wanted to be very specific on how that use was to function on that property, because it's right next to Mediterra. It's across the street from Cordova. If the railroad does exotic removal, you're going to see right into that property. So we wanted to be very careful on what uses could be there. Plus, with the neighborhood meetings, there wasn't a lot of discussion about an outdoor contractor being there. And that's what the delicate line that we were trying to walk is, how can we support the current property owner until they can build something, and that was the best way that we thought we could get there.
Any other questions?
So based on staff and the residents in the area, the amendment to allow the contractor 3, those parties are all in agreement. So we don't really have an outstanding issue, do we?
I think, well, the applicant would like to have some more flexibility in the condition 12, because what I did is I said this use is limited to Kelly Roofing only. So they would like to have some flexibility where if there's a comparable tenant that could occur, but also more, I would say, just clear direction in the condition that light fabrication could occur. The contractor builder group 2 use does allow light fabrication. So it wasn't my intent to go ahead and allow no fabrication. Light fabrication is appropriate under a lower intensity use category. So the applicant added that language, and that I don't have an objection to. And I think in concept, I could be okay with their modifications to condition 12. I just want to be able to go ahead and really think about that before I commit.
Okay, any other questions for Jackie?
Yeah, I want to switch gears for just a second and go back to the hooking up to the public sewer issue. It seems as though we're almost developing a new policy here. We have a very unusual site in terms of its shape, in terms of what surrounds it, the railroad, etc. However, the site is an infill site. And if we say or allow or suggest to the city council that if uses are selected by a developer that don't economically support connection to the public sewer system, then you can use a septic field. Are we creating a new policy here? You understand what I'm saying? The list of uses that the developer selected do not economically support, he says, hook up to the public sewer system. Is that a reason not to hook up to the public sewer system? Sounds like a new policy to me.
When you build phase 2, you must connect, excuse me, to the sewer system. So it's a question of, are they going to build phase 2 regardless of what use it has? If they build phase 2, they must connect. At least that's the way I read it.
But we could get stuck on phase 1 and
Sorry?
never get to, we could get stuck on phase 1 and never get to phase 2.
Well, that's exactly right. And apparently they currently have permission to have a septic system. That's not for us to decide, right? Isn't that for the Board of Health or whoever decides whether you can have a septic system or not?
But building 2 exceeds 30,000 square feet.
Well, phase 2.
No, that's phase 1. Building 2, developers. Building 2 is phase 1, and that size exceeds 30,000 square feet.
Okay, but you've heard them say that the effluent is nothing. It's very limited to what, 400 gallons? I mean, I think that, look, my opinion is there's adequate controls as to whether it's a septic system or a sewer system, and it depends on the amount of buildings and the amount of tenants and the amount of people there. That's the way I feel about it.
And I kind of agree with that. For me, that it is still allowable based upon what they want to do with phase 1.
Right.
It is allowable. And it seems to me we'd get into more trouble if we begin to create another rule that says, well, let's create our own rule that says it's not allowed. And if it is allowed by city code and whatever, sewer and so forth, that particular use for phase 1 still is compatible with the standards for use of a septic system, then I think we should go along with that, because otherwise we're going to be getting into the weeds and possible legal issues if we say, well, phase 1, even though it's approved over here and it's okay, well, we're going to change that and say it's restricted. So I think, strictly speaking now, for the phase 1, to me, it does comply with the current standards and obligations, conditions, and so forth. Then I think that to me is a given. I can't see changing something that is not applicable in this particular phase 1.
That is correct. My opinion.
I thought the rule was that if the building exceeds 30,000 square feet, you got to connect to the city system. And that's why, and I could be totally wrong, I'm the new guy, but that's also why the staff didn't recommend this deviation.
And this is Kelly Macklin. That's what I understood as well, and I'm a new guy, so I definitely would like clarification on this.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful that Bruce brought this up, because it's been bothering me.
The other thing that we seem to be missing, that's also in the report, 2019-2020 City Council strategic priorities include improving stormwater management and environmental protection. The use of septic when connection to central sewer is available conflicts with the intent of those priorities as it pertains to water quality. So the city has given us guidance on how to deal with these situations. It's not that we're operating in the dark or creating new rules. There's a city policy that we seem to be ignoring.
Where were you reading that, Bruce?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
deviation number 4.
It's in the justification of deviation 4.
It's on page 5 of the staff report.
Yeah, page 5.
Okay, got it.
About the middle
Thank
of the
you.
page.
And again, the strategic priorities, and Derek, you might want to correct me if I'm wrong, because I know you attend those more than I have, but it's when the council gets together and they set strategic priorities for that year. So that is the list that I was referencing, is their strategic priority list. And again, because it was their strategic priority list, that's why I went ahead and I'm deferring this policy call to the city council. The regulation is on page 4, and what it says is connection to sanitary sewer system when building size exceeds 30,000 square feet or estimated wastewater flow exceeds 5,000 gallons per day. So based on the building footprint for the first building that would be constructed, it exceeds 30,000 square feet, but it generates less than 5,000 gallons. So, but it's not an either or in the land development code, it's an or. So that's why it was our opinion that they needed a deviation to go ahead and request for the continuation of that ability.
Well, and I'll just add a little bit in there. I believe that even under the code, there is provisions for administrative waivers for mandatory septic connections. And one of the conditions to be considered is the financial hardship of connecting at that time. So, you know, we're talking about what the city council strategic policy or goals are. Those are goals. They have not implemented in policies other than what you're already seeing in the conditions in the land development regulation. So, you know, the conditions in the land development regulation say, you know, mandatory connection is required when it's over 30,000 or 5,000, whatever that threshold is, 5,000 gallons. The issue is, and of course, like any other standard, the applicant can request deviations. There are considerations for those deviations. In this case, they're indicating that the particular use in that building is not particularly objectionable. And at some point in the future, it will be connected. And that's just a recommendation for you guys to make if you think that deviation is justified, or if not.
I think the deviation has been pretty well justified, because again, the size of the building is one issue, but the effluent is really the major issue, that 5,000 gallons or less. So there it is. It's going to be less than that. So it seems to me that condition still is met. So I do support what the staff has recommended. I think the requirements of the deviation, I think, have been very clearly established, at least in my mind.
Jackie, does the staff monitor sewage flow to a septic system?
No, there's no way.
No?
I'm not aware of that. That would probably be more with my building official. I'd have to ask him. So unfortunately, I cannot answer that question for you. I don't have the knowledge.
And that's generally the Department of Health. That's not going to be from community development.
For this phase 1 building, we don't know who the tenants are. Is that correct? It's not all open storage space. I'm envisioning office space.
Yeah, if I'm allowed to speak, Chairman, Timothy Sheehan,
Of course.
the office space that's shown in the lower part of the building is a replacement for part of the existing building, which will be removed, which is not shown on the plan, but there's currently approximately 2,600 or 3,000 square foot metal addition on that building in the center that exists now. That's actually going to be removed, and that's office space for Kelly Roofing, and it's going to be replaced by similar square footage in the lower level of the new building. So there's no additional office space being added, and the upper levels are simply storage facilities with a couple of amenity bathrooms that to serve the people that are storing their stuff. So there's no live-in within the buildings, at least contemplated, and it's replacement of existing office space that's being removed during construction, and temporarily they'll be off-site and then they'll come back on-site. And one other thing I would say I'd like to mention is that when Jackie described the two buildings, it's actually the north building that is approved for 5 stories, and the south building, which is going to be built first, is currently approved for 3 stories. And the building to the north, the 5-story building, is probably most visible, and that's actually being lowered to 4 stories. And the building, the L-shaped building to the south, is actually adding the story. That's the building that's going up 1 story, and it's more screened from the road. So the net is this this less visual impact. And one other thing regarding the sewer, and don't want to be out of line how I say this, but the existing sewer and the existing plan, we could by right just go ahead and build that and rely on the septic plan that was approved back in 2014. We're trying to be sensitive with the city as much as we can. We've done tremendous amount of work with Jackie to both lower the building and to come in compliance with the sewer. But we do at the time, currently have the right to build both buildings and not connect to the sewer, which is in existence. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jackie, but I think that's the case. But our goal is, but we don't see there's a large. It's a very low, use of water septic with these buildings.
Thank you, Tim. So Jackie, that brings me to Building 2, Phase 1 has already been approved for use of a septic tank system and leach field, but we're lowering the square footage now of building number 2. We're taking it from, we're increasing the size. What is it? Building 1, building number 2, Tim, is Phase 1, and we're reducing it from 5 stories to 4 stories?
Correct. Well, unfortunately, the numbering got messed up early on these buildings, and building 2 is going to be built first, and building 1 is going to be built second. So the L-shaped building referred to as building 1, but propose that building be built first. And septic already exists to whatever support that building. Now, what we propose, move that from the area where the building would be built and build a brick system so that there's no question about failure or anything, and build it up underneath what would become this building. So we would have to remove the rebuilt system once building 1 is built, which is actually the second building to be built.
And the L-shaped building has already been approved for 5 stories.
No, that's been approved for 3 stories.
So the L-shaped building is getting bigger in square footage.
It's at 1 floor, and the building to the north is being reduced by 1 floor.
And what's being stored in stories 2, 3, and 4
In both buildings.
in the L-shaped building?
In both buildings, but specifically the L-shaped building, just self-storage.
Self-storage.
You go up an elevator, you go into a concrete hallway, you see rows and rows and rows of metal roll-up doors, and you put it in, and then it's all. There's no office. There's no resident in those upper
Okay,
levels.
that's my bad. I misunderstood that use of the L-shaped building.
and therefore not an issue with effluent, basically, is what you're saying. And it seems to be logical.
Absolutely.
Very modest.
Jackie, the staff isn't supporting this deviation because you just want us to make a decision rather than you.
We think it's a policy decision by the city council.
So it's okay historically, you guys that have been on this board for a while, it's okay to kick this can on down the road to the council.
Absolutely.
In this instance.
It's expected.
What I would recommend, as I stated before, is for the applicant and Becky's group, the staff, to sit down and see if they could iron out any of these differences with respect to the conditions. I'm sure that they are the experts and they are the ones who would be a lot better and better equipped to do that than we are. So my recommendation, that's what I would recommend. Now, if all the discussion and questions have been raised and answered, I guess now is to ask for if there are any public comments.
Gary's got one more question.
Sorry.
Derek and Jackie, and Tony, sorry, is it appropriate to ask what the cost would be to connect to the city sewer now?
Absolutely.
It's not appropriate?
No, it is appropriate. I mean,
It is
the
appropriate.
idea here is it's a financial concern is what they're alleging the hardship is. So yes, I believe it is appropriate.
And I certainly understand the financial concern and hardship. I would want the second building online and producing before I spent $1 billion to connect to the city sewer system.
Whatever number they give you now is going to be modified probably extensively by the time phase 2 commences. So, I mean, it's a good idea to have it as a theoretical, a notional number, but I don't know what good it does. My opinion.
I'm happy to share that. We think it's around $250,000 to $300,000.
Okay.
Because of the length of the line and whatever hookups, and we may have to go either under a road or under the railway, and so it's not going to be an easy or inexpensive thing as much as we would like. If it was readily available at the site, there would be no question. We're going to spend a fair amount of money to relocate the existing improved septic field. We think that's doing the right thing on the interim basis, but it is, maybe 7 to 10% of the total project cost, which is significant when you think about it's adding 2 or 3 bathrooms with no showers and no kitchen or anything else like that. It's
and that's just sewer and water. The storm water runoff, we don't have to worry about connecting to anybody for that because you're able to use your man-made pond.
No, there's extensive drainage that will be put in the site to accommodate stormwater drainage, which is separate from this. The sewer will not, the septic field will not in any way go near the pond, but there's extensive work that will be contemplated, significant, to handle stormwater drainage. And we also have a condition that comes from the ACE storage on the other side that comes actually across our property, and it's historical. And as part of that engineering design, we're proposing at our cost to clear that up, to accommodate that flow into, which already flows into our pond across, it's historical sheet flow from that property. Our engineering is designed to actually help control that, which they have some flooding over there, which floods over our driveway into the pond. So there is a big net benefit there, on the stormwater modeling.
Jackie, correct me if I'm wrong. Tim said that they're approved, I guess, under ordinance 909-14, that they could build the entire project on septic. On page 25, it says that the property will be required to water and sewer hookup prior to certificate of completion when the flow generated to the septic drain bed exceeds 3,200 square feet capacity for the drain bed. So he's right in that they are approved, but only up to a certain limit.
That's
Right.
correct. That's
Okay,
how I would
thank
read
you.
the condition.
Thank you.
Anything else? Any public comment? Well,
Addison, do we have any public comment?
There is no public comment for this meeting.
Okay, great.
okay, then I guess it's time to vote. May
Mr.
I-
Chairman,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, please.
I make a motion to approve the rezoning request as presented, consistent with the comprehensive plan and the findings of the staff. However, items 5E, 7G, 9F, 12A, 12B are subject to further negotiations with staff and the applicant.
Any second?
I'll second it.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
Aye.
you need a roll call?
Oh, you can call the roll.
Kelly Macklin,
I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
Aye, present.
Ben Hershenson,
Present, and I say aye on the, yes, on the motion.
aye. Okay, Gary Gambrell,
Aye.
Bruce Galloway,
Present, aye.
Russ Wynn,
Aye.
Richard Donnelly,
Aye.
Chairman Rassio.
Aye.
Congratulations on your first hearing as a new zoning board.
Thank you. Let me say something. I would want to congratulate the staff and the applicant for their cogent presentation. I think it was right on point, and I think that really helped. The renderings of the photos helped a lot. It's a lot more than we've seen in other meetings. And again, congratulations and thank you very much. And I wish you the best of luck in your negotiations with the staff. Thank you again.
Tony, may I just add one comment here? I'm meeting some people here for the first time. I want to say we all hit the ground running, and it's a pleasure sitting here and how we all kind of really work together. And that's really a good thing to say. I think in this day and age, to be able to do that, seeing somebody for the first time, I think it says a lot about the intelligence of the group and the humility on the part of the group, as well as the respect that we all have for one another. I really enjoyed this experience.
Thank you, Ben.
And then also, I just want to say, Tony, thanks for picking up the mantle for the chair there. And, yeah,
I think it was surprisingly frustrating on me, but I'm glad I was able to quit myself for the first time.
Chairman Roscoe, if I could, Timothy Sheehan is on behalf of the ownership. I'd really like to thank the whole team from Jackie's group, men and women that work hard for the city, did an excellent job working with us to develop this over the past couple of years, and certainly appreciate the support of the board and good questions and fair questions. And we will work in good faith with Jackie and her team to come to amenable resolution to the slight, variations we have on the deviations, and we'll do everything we can to make it an excellent project and be a positive, continuing positive citizen for the city of Bonita Springs.
A lot of that was due, Tim, to extensive preparation.
Oh, it was
You
extensive.
presented it very well, and I think that's what helped us move along very quickly.
Jackie did an excellent job guiding us. So, and the whole team, her whole team over the past couple of years, we've learned a lot, and it was, very good give and take. And she was very professional along with the rest of her staff. So we greatly appreciate it. And I want to thank Stuart for really helping us from a professional side, and Mike, who hasn't had a chance to speak on behalf of our team, but he's literally been working on this since before 2014 approval. done a great job. So very, very meticulous and detail oriented. We'll continue to try to maintain that high standard for the city.
I
Thank
will entertain a motion for adjournment.
I so,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
Mr. Chairman, could I address the board for a moment?
you certainly.
Gentlemen, myself and Mr. Wynn are old timers on this board. I go back about 4 years. Russ is probably 3. And we just recently, in the last meeting, as you probably know, there's some major changes happened to this board.
Huh.
We lost some very good people. It would appear that we're getting some very good people renewed. But I think we should think about, and I'd like to include Mr. Dahmer and our Mr. Rooney in this conversation, if I might. I think we need to think about some of the reasons for why these good folks left us. And from our perspective, and it's not 100% clear, but it would appear to us, and I think Russ will back me up on this, that one of the reasons that these folks left was because of their frustration in the fact that decisions made by the zoning board don't always be completely aired at the city council level. In fact, there have even been rumors that in many cases during a city council meeting, none of the council members ever say, well, what did the zoning board think? Our feeling, and I think Russ will agree with me, and probably Mr. Dahmer, is that there should be a better way for the decisions of this board to be presented to the council. And the flip side of that would also be, seems to me, that once the council has made a decision, their decision should be passed back down the line to the zoning board, so that we might discover why they made the decision that we did. For myself, I have no idea what happens at a city council meeting with our applications.
Yeah, I have heard that the city council never advises the zoning board of what they've done with respect to the proposals made by the zoning board.
So I think
your first question, I don't know what we could do. I mean, the only thing we can do is just keep presenting these things to the city council. I mean,
well, it becomes a question of how do you present them? Do you as the chairman attend the meeting? Do you as the chairman write up a draft, a summary, and present it? How do you do that?
I would be amenable to being present at a city council meeting when one of the zoning board issues is presented to them to answer questions. If they have any questions for me, how did you guys decide this? What was the discussion? I mean, it's a lot better to do that orally than it is from simply reading a set of minutes. I mean, I'm amenable to that if the city council would entertain that.
Yeah, I
Can I
think,
make a
Tony, I think
recommendation,
Jacqueline,
Tony, towards this end? I think that we need a breathing space. And I would like to sit with Mr. Rooney and others of staff and so forth to begin to develop a list of concerns, recommendations, process-wise I'm talking about, rules of procedure, however you want to, categorize them. But I think we need to get together, and I know we all hate the word workshop, but I think that we're a new group, a different group, perhaps different philosophies and so forth. But we need to come together because I think the issues that have just been mentioned make a lot of sense. But I don't think we can resolve them here. I think we need an opportunity separate from a zoning board hearing or actual meeting where we have a workshop and come together and put down what about some of our thoughts and then present them appropriately to the council.
That's
Mr.
right.
Chairman.
And hope that the council listens, at least listens.
Mr. Chairman, this is Russ Wynn for the record. I think if I remember, I think John and Jacqueline, I think when you go before the city council, you'll say, because I've heard you say this before, and I'm not there all the time, the zoning board recommended or the zoning board said. And I've heard that from time to time from you guys, at least make
Correct.
a mention of that, and then,
Yeah, what
Yeah, so
I
maybe-
do is so when I present cases and I have a presentation, I actually have a slide dedicated to the zoning board hearing, which has the recommendation, the concerns that were brought up by the board, and then also the concerns by the public. So that's what I do as part of my cases when I bring them to city council. And most of our staff does the same. But if there are definitely better ways to do that, we are willing to definitely accommodate that, for sure.
So I'll add a little bit too. If you hadn't watched the meeting most recently with the city council, we're following the resignation of several, longstanding and influential board members on the zoning board. And I would say that Mr. Donnelly's comments are pretty reflective of those considerations. Also that, in the time of COVID and some of the other delays and some legislative requirements the state's put on us, we've also seen a lot of times where the hearing process is rushed, where you're going from zoning board one day and the very next day it's at the city council level. So that doesn't give the city council a lot of time to watch the meetings and kind of inform themselves. Also, I've heard from several city council members who watched the meetings. They found that often the zoning board, either between themselves, with the applicants on contentious issues, and even with staff, it becomes too much of a free-for-all, and that makes it easier for them to discount the considerations of the zoning board when the zoning board itself, doesn't seem to have a rudder. So I have talked to the council and suggested that, one of my concerns ever since I got here is that the criteria utilized by the zoning board for the approval of some of their items is fairly vague. It's not very helpful. There hasn't been any training for the zoning board in years. And so I've got direction. I'm working with the manager to at some point we'll start doing training, not only for the zoning board, for local planning agency and city council. I sent you all a checklist I've been working on for a little while, and that was based on basically how I've seen the zoning board get off topic in the past and try to keep everyone on the level. I've also recommended to the council that they, if they want to make drastic changes to the zoning board or the local planning agency, now would be the time to do it when there's a lot of flux in the membership. I will tell you that one of the recommendations I made was to consider giving the zoning board final authority on some items like variances and special exceptions, so that there wasn't a recommending body anymore, but it was an actual decision-making body, which would lend some gravitas to it. And then the other issue was I actually recommended considering moving rezonings to the local planning agency. And that was driven a lot because that's pretty much the standard in around the state, but also because our conversation at the zoning board level has almost entirely been focused on comprehensive planning. And well, that is the role of the local planning agency. And so we've had meetings in the past year where the city council has approved comprehensive plan changes. And then when the subsequent rezoning came through, the zoning board found that those rezonings were inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. And sometimes those comprehensive plan changes had been recommended as consistent with the comprehensive plan from the local planning agency. So we have this devolution of authority where the city council and the local plan agency, the two boards that are tasked with developing the policy and reviewing the policies for comprehensive plan. And then the zoning board spends all of its time talking about comprehensive plan issues. And to me, that tells me that there's something structurally wrong. And so that either means moving the authorities or giving the zoning board clear criteria upon which to make their considerations. And I think if you've all seen the staff reports, it's very difficult.
You have to define our remit very narrowly. It's the only way we're going to do it. I mean, you should present the issue And that's the issue we have to worry about. Never mind the peripheral.
Well, what I'd like to do is, I was going to bring some presentations to the city council, but if the board is amenable to Mr. Hutchinson's recommendation, we can set up a workshop, and I'd be happy to go through those ideas with you first and get recommendations. And they would be, not only just changing the board structure, but really focusing more on the findings requirements.
I agree. I'm all for that.
And this is Russ Wynn for the record. I would be open to that too. I think that'd be very helpful, especially to us that's been on here before. I think we tend to sometimes get lost in the weeds a little bit. And I think with the newer members that are on there, I think this is a great time to just kind of get our bearings back and our focus, like you're saying. I think it'd be a great introduction.
And there's another aspect, that we can consider, and I keep dropping these things on poor John and Jackie without even talking to them about it. So I sort of enjoy that, which is, one of the things that zoning board has focused on a great deal has been design. And I've heard it in the past from the city council. If we ever move towards the idea of some kind of design review, maybe that's something that replaces the rezoning discussions at the zoning board. And so there are recommendations on architectural stylings and other issues that may be something to consider too. So I'm looking for any recommendations. Feel free to email me. I'll put something together in more of a PowerPoint and work on dates to get together with everyone.
From what I understand, Derek, we do not have an architectural review committee or anything in Bonita Springs. Like
we have a city architect that reviews plans. We do not have an architectural. We have a city architect that reviews plans. We do not have a board.
Oh, okay.
This is exactly why we need to understand what the role is going to be, specific in nature, I would hope, and understand. I go to a lot of city council meetings. I don't know why, but I do. I've done a lot for the last 17 years. And they're very informative. And I have to say this, and not because it's just here. I say it privately, publicly, I say it to my friends. And that is, the staff is absolutely amazing, because the detail of what, and believe me, I read every single one of those pages. I'm sure we all did, right? And the staff is to be commended, because when the staff makes a recommendation, they didn't just get it in front of them. They've been working on this particular project now for years. Right. And it was very detailed. It was excellent. And to me, I learned so much just reading about this project, this application, just by looking at the staff report, then going back and forth with the initial application. But I need some more identity as to what our role is. I look forward to having a workshop or session, bringing in staff, training, call it training actually. And I think it'll be better for the city and better for us relative to our identity, proper elements of how we proceed and so forth, what our limitations are, where we should not delve into, what we should do. So I hope that can be scheduled fairly soon, because everybody's busy, but we'll find the time.
All right, Derek, we leave it to you then.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Gary here. I want to add something to Ben. Ben, I look forward to working with you. I want to back up to training and workshop and all that stuff. I want to go to day one, hour one. I'd like to learn more about you guys. I'd like to learn everybody's background.
I'll give you a summary of my doctoral dissertation, and if that doesn't put you to sleep, nothing will. So let me know, Gary, when you're available. We can try that. We could try to do that. What a good group. I enjoyed the meeting.
I'm just an old lawyer. I mean, I
never
was an administrative law judge for a year in the city of New York, so I have a little kind of quasi-judicial experience anyway, which I think helps a little bit. That's me.
Are we done?
I hope.
Okay, good.
All right. Goodbye,
Right.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.
At the next meeting, if not sooner. Thank you very much. Goodbye.